Hello and welcome to More Fulfilling Order Fulfillment. Create a better customer and compliance experience. My name is Diana DiBello and I am so excited that you're joining us today. I'm a PSC at Avalara, that's a product solution engineer, and I will be your moderator for this captivating session today. Before we begin, though, we're going to have some housekeeping items here. So I'm just going to go over a couple housekeeping items. We are recording, and if you want to listen to this session again or share it with a colleague, it will be available on demand starting tomorrow. All right, next, chat. The button down at the bottom with the little chat bubble is for group chat. So you can insert your questions there. So as we're going through the session, we will be taking your questions in chat, and we do have moderators and Asad answering your questions real time. And then everyone was muted upon entry. So we are asking everyone to stay on mute to minimize potential background noise and to use the chat to ask those questions. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful guest speaker today, Asad Ahmed, and he is a Principal Industry Solutions Advisor at NetSuite or Oracle. And he is here today to talk with us about order fulfillment, which is a great, exciting topic, I think. Order fulfillment and taxes. What better stuff could you ask for? All right, so the first section we're going to talk about. Before we do that, Asad, do you want to do any intro?
I'll just say a quick hello. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to join everyone today. And I was really excited we get to talk about taxes after April 15th and order fulfillment. What else could be more fun than this?
Great. So I think our first topic we're going to talk about is exceeding customer experience expectations. When you're dealing in this omni-channel fulfillment environment, that's such a critical thing for companies to do, is to manage that customer experience. Everybody's talking about it. So tell me a little bit about intelligence for your order allocation and what that all means.
So when we talk about intelligence for your order allocation, the idea is being able to allocate inventory to orders that are coming in based on different channels that are coming in from. As you'll know, like, we always hear this word omni-channel quite a bit nowadays. I think it's very prevalent in all of the industry. It's not only retail, but it's actually around warehouse distribution space, manufacturing, everywhere at that point in time. The key thing that they're looking for intelligent allocation is that being able to identify products per channel and allocating them as the orders are coming in, and being able to depreciate your inventory in real time. That is very critical at this point in time, because if you have multiple channels pulling from your inventory and it's not in real time, you can always get into a little bit of, have a little bit of a sticky wicket there, where multiple people order the product, it's not being able to get, the orders are not able to get fulfilled, which leads to customer dissatisfaction, which eventually means those customers are going somewhere else to get their orders filled.
So do you find that that's even more critical now when there are issues with supply chain?
110%. If I could add more to that percentage, I would, but I think I'm legally not supposed to. But the idea being, like, with supply chain issues that have been impacted, I think we all have heard some horror stories in some shape or form, and we have also, pretty much everybody at some point has personally been impacted by that, right? The idea being not knowing when your order is being delivered is critical. Yeah, I think when we can't really not address this. One thing that Amazon Prime has done over the course of everybody out there in the world is that we have to change our buying habits from saying, hey, I want the cheapest product. Now I'm looking for the quickest available product. And that kind of applies to the industry overall. Even in B2B buying, B2B purchasing, actually it's more prevalent in B2B purchasing. It's like, I want my products now.
Right.
I want to know when they're getting to me. And if you can't tell that, if you're not able to allocate inventory to those orders in real time and tell the end user, hey, this is when we're delivering this for you, they're going away.
Absolutely. So what about intelligence to your order details and the importance of accuracy? So we talked about all of the order allocation, but now we need to understand what the order details, the implications of that are.
Again, one more time, accuracy is critical. And accuracy not only in terms of delivery information, but also the bottom line information. And this goes more for the sellers than for customers, because again, sellers need to know exactly what the financial impact of a transaction is. When you start talking about the complex allocation of taxes, multiple jurisdictions, opportunity zones, and all of those impacts that come onto an order. So if you sell something for, say, X dollars, you need to know at that point in time, what was the taxable impact of that transaction? If you're not able to get that done right, that just makes it harder for you to be able to close your books at the end of your period. Also, inaccuracies tend to lead into impact your bottom line as well.
And have you seen, like, in scenarios where retailers are using like buy online, pick up in store, or they're doing send sales, do you find that ever causes issues with getting the order details accurate?
That can definitely be a challenge, right? If I'm buying online and picking up in store versus getting it delivered to my place of business or my residence, there is going to be a different tax impact of that.
Right.
And being able to see that, that's very, very critical. And then there's other things that will also come into play at that point in time. So having the right information, having the right systems in place is extremely critical.
Yeah, and what I've seen is some systems out there don't allow you to do address at the line level. But if you are selling, B2B, you most likely will need to ship to multiple locations. So how do companies, I've spoken with companies and they're like, oh, we keep an Excel spreadsheet on the side for all the ship to addresses. So talk a little bit about the implications of doing that.
Diana, I will add one more to it, right? In B2B, there is that multi-location fulfillment is another thing that comes in. Is like a lot of companies will have a purchaser who buys products that need to be delivered to multiple different facilities. So you got to start thinking about how does the tax impact work on that type of a transaction as well.
Right.
So going back to your question of having how we work with these impacts and such. There's definitely things that will come into play for us over here. Having the information is very critical. Having tax impact information is very critical. And one of the things that we always, when we're working with our customers, we'll always talk about having Avalara in the mix. Because again, you don't want to have to pull a spreadsheet at the end of the day, try to figure out what happened. You always want to be, as a business, we always say you want to be audit ready. And if you're lagging behind in being able to work your transactions, that's going to be a challenge that you're putting off for later. Seriously, when we talk about these days, most businesses are looking for efficiencies. And if you don't have these systems in place, you are not efficient. And if you're not efficient, you're really leaving money on the table at that point.
Absolutely. Great points. So let's move on to our next topic, which is one that's also fascinating, is centralizing order management. So what have you seen in the industry? Do you see that, a number retailers typically have multiple channels and then they manage the orders by the different channels that they're selling through? What is the value of having centralized order management, and what risk do you eliminate by doing that or minimize?
I would say when we talk about centralized order management, it is critical especially for retail these days, right? And you have so many different channels that are coming into the mix. It's not only brick and mortar, it's not only your web properties, but we have seen retail add in things like going through marketplaces to meet their customers. Another thing that we've seen quite a bit on the rise is that whole pop-up store type of sales channel. Another one is the rise of the consignment stores. So when you kind of go through the process of seeing all of these things come in, you really want to have a centralized command center on your part. Being able to make sure that inventory is allocated equally, if that is how you want to do it, across the board. When you have orders coming into the mix, you know that when you need to stop taking orders from a certain channel because you've depleted that inventory. You also need to be able to see which one of your channels brings you a larger profit margin. What is the cost of sale going through other channels, and being able to allocate inventory intelligently in that way. So again, centralized order management is very critical.
Yeah, and it really makes it easier to keep all of that data centralized, not only for the managing of your supply chain, but also for all of the accounting related and financial related activities associated with that, I'd imagine.
100%. And one more thing that we should not miss out is being able to show KPIs in real time to the sales management. Again, they need to know what the standing is of the business.
Yep. Great. All right. So then my favorite topic is going to be centralized tax content. So why do you need centralized tax content?
Well, it's again like everything that we've talked about so far today, right? If you don't have centralized tax content, you again are not able to know what the tax impact of a transaction is, depending on which channel it's coming in from. That is just kicking the can down the street, so that when you do have to sit down and figure out the profitability, figure out what is it that you owe the government at the end of the time period. You want to be tax audit ready. If you don't have these tools in play and having the right tech stack on your part, that is just going to be a challenge. And again, you don't want to stay up late at night trying to figure that out.
Right. And I actually have a story from a client I had in the past. They were a very large retailer of clothing in all states, but New York was one of the states that they dealt with, and they were audited. And the reports that they used from their centralized tax solution did not identify the quantity on the line items. So the state of New York charged them assessments because it looked like they had one line item that was $400. Well, clothing in New York up to $110 is exempt per item, but they didn't have anything that was $400 a piece. That would be like 3-4 shirts. So when we went back into the source database and pulled out the quantity, we got them back a bunch of money from that assessment. So I think it's critical too to have the details that you need to support an audit and be able to go back and look at data from a historical perspective. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. We have heard similar stories. One of which, like, we were working with the retailer, and at the end of the day, they weren't charging the right amount of tax, and they would have to pay taxes on transactions out of pocket on their end because they didn't want to go back to the customer and saying, right, hey, you owe whatever X more dollars on a certain transaction.
Right.
So again, going back to centralized information is critical.
So how about using automation to enhance the customer experience?
I think automation is critical at this point in time, right? And I think automation is in the DNA of every transaction that happens. Again, I'll bring in the Amazon conversation. Everybody is used to a certain way of doing business at this point. Again, we have developed our habits on a certain channel, and it works really well. And that is the expectation that's set across the board for all of the retail channels that are there. That's why when we at Oracle NetSuite are working with retailers, and we get to work with a ton of retailers. We have over 30,000 different logos that we have worked with across, over the course of time. We always bring in this conversation. It's like, hey, you want to have certain automations in place. You want to be able to, again, most businesses, the reason why they are looking at an ERP is they want to function more efficiently. And efficiency comes in with automation. Having tax information in there, again, Avalara has been a great partner for us over the course of the years, where it not only does the zip taxing, but also zip plus 4. When you start adding in other complexities to your transaction, again, a lot of retailers are now not only just selling you the goods. At this point, they're adding in some sort of services to go with that.
Right.
How do you tax that? Certain aspects can be like, hey, how do you deal with digital versus physical goods sales? There is that part of it. How do you manage if there is a lot of retailers are now kind of going towards the subscription side of things? Again, how do you deal with that? So again, as you can see, gone are the days where you just bought one thing from a retailer. It was a simple transaction. It was done. It's really complex.
Right, it is. So say I am a retailer and I'm thinking, you know what, maybe it's time I go with a NetSuite solution or some similar solution. Do you think that over the years it's gotten easier to implement some of these technology solutions? Not dating myself, but I remember the days that implementing an ERP would be like a 3-year project. And I'm sure it still is for large corporations. But do you feel that that the technology has gotten easier to implement?
I would say technology has definitely gotten easier to implement, but there are also other things, like there is so many different bits of technology that are out there. The way that we have worked here at Oracle NetSuite is we bring in our previous experience. As I mentioned earlier, we have worked with over 30,000 different organizations in every different walk of life. So again, when you come to us, we will bring in our implementation methodology that we have seen success with. We're not only going in and saying, like, hey, we're not only just going in and asking questions like, hey, how do you want your ERP to work? But we're going in more so like, hey, you're a retailer of X type of products. Are these your processes? If these are your processes, we'll align you with what we call is our suite success implementation methodology that aligns really well. And one of the things that also helps out is, especially for us, is that we are a suite of products. You are buying into a system. You can go with modules. You don't have to, again, what you mentioned earlier, 3-year implementation cycles. If you're a small retailer, if you're a growth company, you may not have the expertise, you may not have the time, you may not have the resources to bite it all off in day one. So working with the step-by-step approach, a stairway approach, we always like to do that on our part.
And I think previously too, a lot of companies would buy, they buy their e-commerce solution from here and their ERP from here, and then their supply chain information. So they would use multiple solutions, but I think NetSuite does a nice job of being a really robust, holistic solution for all those aspects of their business.
100%, right? And you said it right? A lot of, again, retailer would start as like, hey, I'm going to be an online retailer. So the first thing that you focus on is, I need a commerce solution. So you would just go build this bespoke commerce experience. And then you realize, well, I have inventory management issues because now we have grown. So I need to go in and build out something for my inventory solution. So you go build that out. Then hey, we're seeing a lot of growth. Let's open up a brick and mortar. Now you're thinking about a POS. And now you got, hey, but now since we need a DC to be able to send inventory every which way. So again, as you can see, the complexity just keeps growing and growing and growing. And when you're piecemealing a solution, what you're basically just setting yourself up for is challenges down the road.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some specific areas in automation, like real-time inventory visibility and then accurate compliance.
At real-time inventory visibility, again, we mentioned this earlier part of our conversation today. As consumers, we want to know when and what is available. How quickly can I get it? And when you're able to tell someone, hey, we have in stock, certain things in stock, it's critical. Mm-hmm. You will also, on certain web tools or websites, you'll see certain things as, hey, only 5 left going fast. So you're almost like telling the customer, hey, you want this, you need to be able to take your action now, or we have plenty of them in stock. So again, it's the experience that you provide them with.
Right. Great. So let's move on to our next discussion item, which is optimizing order delivery or efficiency. So how do you find, how are customers finding new ways to drive costs out of the distribution process?
The way that when we talk about driving costs out of the distribution process is there's a couple of different ways that we have seen that happen. Generally speaking, when we talk about retail, order fulfillment would be centralized. What we have seen for a lot of our retailers is they're decentralizing their order fulfillment. When I say decentralizing, it's either going in and getting a network of 3PLs in the mix of that, even using their forward deployed inventory, so such as retail locations for order fulfillment. It then does two things. First, it helps you take your inventory off the floor quickly, so you can, and sometimes you're able to use closer to the customer replenishment fulfillment side of things. So that really helps that out, and then being able to backfill those orders from the distribution space. So again, what we've seen is depending on how you're doing business and what's in the mix, is bringing in additional distribution centers, 3PLs, bringing in your retail locations to do the fulfillments for you too.
Awesome. And then how do different distribution models impact tax compliance?
Well, it's always going to impact the taxes at the end of the day, right? Maybe, sometimes you are, sometimes if you're shipping out of your warehouse, the taxes are going to be based on that zip code that you have. But if I'm going in and picking up whatever I purchased from that store, I'll say this, right? I like to go pick up things out of Delaware, right? Because it's tax-free at the end.
You didn't say that. I didn't hear that. No.
It's on the way later.
Yeah.
But again, the idea is, it sometimes helps you out at that point.
Right.
So, but also on the flip side of it, you want to be able to calculate those taxes correctly. If we haven't sent this today, definitely want to repeat this for retailers. Like, you want to have systems in place, you want to have automation in place to be able to do that. One thing we've seen is the complexity with tax calculation and allocating the right amount of taxes on a transaction tends to get more difficult with time. So again, or complex, I shouldn't use the word difficult, more complex with time. So if you have the right tools, that's an easy part for you to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And this brings up one of my, when I worked in the omni-channel fulfillment space, one of the biggest issues I dealt with the retailers, the online retailers, is at the time of checkout, they did not necessarily know where they were going to be shipping from. So these retailers had a lot of issues with origin-based tax. So the tax rate might change between the time that the customer checks out on the website and when they go to fulfillment, then they assign that warehouse. If it's an origin-based tax state, then that warehouse location is where that tax rate applies. So a number of the large retailers that we dealt with would, they would eat the tax if it was more, and then they would refund their client the tax. But it was always a loss of money for them to handle this origin-based tax issue, and it resulted in a lot of reconciliation issues. So it is a critical thing for companies to decide how they want to deal with that, I would think. Absolutely.
Reconciliation challenges are there. We've all seen that retailers tend to be working on razor-thin margins, and if you're not doing calculations correctly, is it origin-based taxing? How are we doing that? You're basically impacting your bottom line at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you wanted to sum up the whole thing about what we've been talking about here, what are your final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with today?
The way that you kind of brought this up earlier, and I would definitely say this, Pork, right? Technology is your friend. Technology doesn't have to be hard. There are ways to simplify it, and we've done this numerous times where we can walk in and work with retailers and help them out with setting up their tech stack, not piecemealing a solution together, but having a growth-based approach to the system that you need to have in place. And at the end of the day, you will need automation to help you grow. You need to be able to be efficient. You want to be able to do your reconciliation easily, inventory management easily. And again, what we have seen is, if anything, retail, there's going to be more channels added in. There'll be different ways you'll be reaching out to your customers. We haven't talked about it today, but there is that whole metaverse thing that's coming up soon.
Yes.
Or it's here, I should say. How is that going to impact retail?
Crypto.
And crypto. A little bit of sprinkling a little bit of crypto on top. So, that can change a lot of things.
Right.
And what you don't want to have to do is try to figure out how you're going to manage those systems manually. Excel is a great tool, but it is not a business tool to run your business on.
Right. Absolutely. Well, with that, Asad, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your valuable insights. And of course, if you have questions, please type them in the chat and we'll get the answers to you right away. So with that, thank you very much and have a great day.